Yeah, Bruntz, I'm curious. I know that you focus on a lot of kind of different areas within your role for Husker 24/7. At what point did you start to hear rumblings of the whole Dylan Raiola thing?
I mean, Monday. I mean, I think that was Schaefer and I were talking about it, and in the time that we've been covering Nebraska 24/7 Sports, which I believe now is 13 years, the only time that you could kind of that we could kind of remember just kind of a lightning bolt like that was when the press conference or the press release came out that Mike Riley was being hired as Nebraska's head coach. So those types of moments are rare, but yeah, that one there was a few rumblings, but I mean you're kind of at the point where you kind of moved on from that being a possibility, I guess. So there was quite a bit of doubt in my mind, and it was like, okay, there's really something to this in a big way. So yeah, it was. I think the Mike Riley press conference and having to be like, okay, Mike Riley from Oregon State, like that was the.
There's not another Mike Riley.
Yeah, that was the only comparison that we could really come up with.
It's Michael Bruntz with us here on Hurrdat Sports Radio. And Michael, whenever you just look at the week that has it been crazier? I mean, the Monday was crazy. Then you followed up with Tuesday, Wednesday, yesterday with McCord now out. Just the entire week as a whole. Have you remembered covering any crazier recruiting week in Husker history?
Well, there were a few during the Pelini era where there was one recruiting class where they got 13 commitments in 30 days, I think, in December.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I mean, when you're talking about like the types of prospects and players that Nebraska is dealing with right now, I mean that it far surpasses anything that it's kind of had in the past. I mean, you know, if the Dylan Raiola thing gets over the finish line and he ends up signing with Nebraska, I mean, you're talking about the highest rated recruit in the internet era that would be signing with Nebraska. I mean, that's unprecedented for you know the last 20 years. You know, Kyle McCord, a former, you know, 5-star quarterback you're talking about there. I mean, you know, you had Julian Fleming on campus as, you know, another 5-star wide receiver from when he was a recruit. So, no, I mean, it's the type of prospect that you're talking about is so totally different. And I think that's a good thing for Nebraska, certainly. But it also, you know, brings up a different kind of level of nuance that, you know, you got to kind of get used to. And I think that's what you're seeing right now is just a lot of shuffling, a lot of dominoes falling right now with, you know, what Nebraska, especially the quarterback position, is going to look like.
And let's quickly reset it here for listeners. If you somehow missed this yesterday, Kyle McCord was in town on Monday. Things were looking good. And then yesterday it comes out that he has moved on from his consideration of Nebraska. And it's big because Nebraska obviously thought they had maybe their quarterback for next season with his 1 year of eligibility. But the side note to this is Julian Fleming. They were kind of seen as a package deal to Nebraska. Michael, based on what you know and what you've been hearing, do you think Julian Fleming to Nebraska is dead? Does that still have legs? What is the status of Julian Fleming in all of this?
Yeah, I would not bet on that happening. As we sit here this morning, I mean, I don't know that it was ever just a straight package deal. I mean, those tend to kind of evaporate quickly, just based on how that's always kind of gone. But yeah, I mean, I think, you know, he has a lot of options. I mean, he'd been at Penn State earlier or late last week. He's a Pennsylvania guy. I mean, I think, you know, there's a lot of options for him right now. But yeah, I mean, I think it's just kind of what it felt like was happening on Monday. You know, evaporated pretty quickly. But I mean, that's kind of what you have to deal with, I think, when it comes to the quarterback spot. I mean, you know, Kyle McCord has 1 year to kind of make this happen. And then, you know, I think the Raiola news breaking when it did probably wasn't ideal timing for Nebraska. And, you know, now you don't have McCord. Fleming's probably not coming. And you're Nebraska, you're still kind of trying to figure out what your last few pieces of this class look like.
Bruntz, as we move forward, I think the assumption for a lot of people is that Dylan Raiola is going to end up at Nebraska. If that is the case, do you think anyone comes with him? I know in the past there was a lot of talk about maybe him peer recruiting some receivers or other players to Nebraska with him as well. Are we too late in the process for that to still be possible, or are you hearing anything in that area?
Yeah, I mean, it's late. I mean, and that's kind of the unfortunate part of it is if you do end up with Dylan Raiola, you're not going to get any visit weekends after he were to announce, because signing day is next Wednesday. The dead period starts on Monday. Maybe if you have guys that hold off on signing and wait till February, you might be able to get something done there. But right now for Nebraska, you just don't get the benefit of that. And a lot of the guys that visited with Raiola on that big weekend last year are committed elsewhere. They're locked in elsewhere, and it's that would be a tough flip at this point. So, yeah, I mean, we're looking around, we're asking around, but the time frame of things doesn't really help Nebraska in that scenario. So we'll see. I mean, it might even be a situation where he's a big name if he comes to Nebraska and things go well. I mean, maybe that helps you in future classes. But the other piece of it too, Nebraska is in a bit of a numbers crunch right now. I mean, you've seen two guys leave the recruiting class in the last couple of weeks, which were largely numbers issues. So that's a consideration too, is Nebraska just doesn't have a ton of space in their locker room right now to bring a bunch of extra guys in that they weren't planning on going into this week. So that's also a consideration too.
Bruntz, with the short amount of time, do you think maybe the Dylan Raiola impact could be seen more in the spring transfer period, with specifically receivers maybe saying like, hey, there's a 5-star quarterback on campus, this all of a sudden is a much more attractive destination?
Could be. I'm eager to kind of see, this next time around what that spring period looks like, because it's really short. I think with the timing of when the portal actually opens, I think Nebraska is actually still going to be going through spring ball at that point. So, we'll see. I mean, I think that would be one potential benefit is like, hey, look, there's this guy at this school I'll maybe take a closer look at. But, with the way that the transfers are going right now, and, I think there should probably be a little bit of a correction somewhat in terms of how many guys are going into the portal. But, that's out there, I guess, that, maybe you'd get that spring bump. But, if you're Nebraska, you'd still need some guys to the side that are on the roster right now that they would want to go elsewhere too, because they're pretty full right now.
It's Michael Bruntz with us here on Hurrdat Sports Radio. And Michael, whenever you look at the Daniel Kaelin angle of things, he hasn't been swept under the rug at all, as it's been made clear to him apparently that Nebraska still has space for him and they will still honor his commitment. But now he's off to go take a look at Michigan State. As you forecast it right now, do you think Daniel Kaelin will be signing on the dotted line come next Wednesday, or do you think he's off elsewhere?
I mean, I would expect him to probably go elsewhere if everything kind of plays out the way it seems like it's going to. Obviously the quick visit to Michigan State and setting that up, I mean, I think that makes sense to me. I mean, when you kind of look at the arc of this class, Daniel Kaelin did a lot to get guys in the class to kind of do the peer recruiting thing, and all of a sudden, your picture gets shaken up a little bit. I mean, I think he's definitely doing his due diligence and looking around. So, yeah, I mean, I would be shocked if he's a Nebraska Cornhusker next Wednesday. But it's unfortunate that things have kind of played out for him the way that they have. I mean, he's committed to Missouri, immediately jumps back in with Nebraska when the door opens, and I'm sure his head's probably spinning with the way things have gone this week. But talented kid, just an absolute stand-up kid. I'll be eager to kind of see what happens, but I would be very surprised if Nebraska ends up taking 2 quarterbacks in the 24 class, just given kind of the way things are trending right now.
Bruntz, speaking of the 24 class, Nebraska did get a commitment yesterday from Alexander Rugeroli. Am I saying that right? Do you know?
Yeah.
Nailed it.
Got it.
Feel great about it.
I feel like you need to say it with like the Italian Danny or the Tommy DeVito hands. Rugeroli.
I would say if I had Tommy DeVito's agent's hat on, then I'd definitely be able to say it correctly. But c'est la vie on that one. I know a lot of people thought when Grant Brix committed that maybe there wasn't room in the class for Rugeroli. Are you aware of how that kind of took place and how those machinations went so that Rugeroli was able to be included with Grant Brix?
Yeah, well, he's technically going to be a walk-on, coming in as a walk-on. But they found room for him and found a way to make it work. So, he was a guy that was kind of a late bloomer as a senior, hadn't played a ton of football, and really, was a high ceiling tackle. And if you look at the way that Nebraska's offensive line class is kind of comprised right now, or comprised, I always forget which one it is, but you look at that group, you've got a lot of guys that project to be interior offensive linemen. And the way that Nebraska's depth chart is right now, I mean, they're pretty heavy already on interior guys. Mm-hmm. And Rugeroli is a guy that, I think that they feel like they can come in and develop. They really liked what he showed his senior year. And, they've been keeping tabs on him for a long time. I mean, I know that Dylan Raiola has been watching him really closely throughout his senior season. Rugeroli came in, I believe, for the Purdue game as an unofficial visitor, mm-hmm. And was pretty close to pulling the trigger after that visit. And it was just kind of a matter of Nebraska making sure that they had the space and could kind of make things work for him. And it ended up working out. It's a big offensive line class, but I mean, there's a few guys in that group that, you feel pretty good about kind of what their long-term picture is. And I know, Grant Brix is some services have him as an interior offensive lineman. Nebraska's only talked tackle with him. So there's some flexibility there. But, I think Nebraska kind of needed to add a true tackle to this class that they could start to develop and get in that pipeline behind Gatula and those guys that signed last year.
I say this sort of tongue in cheek, but I just assumed with like 15 tight ends in this class that some of those would end up as tackles.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a possibility. They've got, and it's the tight end group that they have is really kind of an interesting group. I mean, it's different body types, mm-hmm. different types of tight ends. I mean, you look at a kid like Eric Ingerson at Papio. I mean, he could stick at tight end. He could, grow into a tackle. He could probably play on the defensive side of the ball too. I think you just kind of bring in guys who are, good athletes who, you feel like can kind of grow in your program and kind of see where everything shakes out. And Nebraska showed with A.J. Rollins, they're not afraid to move a guy from tight end to defensive end or maybe take a different look at where a guy fits. So that's an interesting group. And it's maybe we're not talking about this enough, but it just seems like Nebraska is like turning into just like an absolute tight end powerhouse. Like, I mean, the state itself, mm-hmm. like there's, guys in that 25 class that are already going to be national recruits.
Yeah. Who's the kid from Elkhorn North that just got, or has a ton of offers?
Yeah. Lofton.
Yes. That's right.
And there's other guys that you kind of know are going to be in that same group in 25 and 26. Miami is sending an assistant coach to Nebraska in December to recruit tight ends. Like, that kind of tells you, I guess, what kind of athletes are at the state, and that's a good problem. I mean, when you got schools like that coming up to recruit, that bodes well for Nebraska.
Michael, here to quickly discuss a story that's also gone by the wayside, aside from the tight ends. To get back to the offensive line, you have Bryce Benhart announcing earlier this week that he'll be returning for another season at Nebraska, along with Isaac Gifford. And I understand with the storylines this week being quarterbacks are sexy, quarterbacks are the ones that are going to get the name appeal. But I want to get your take on the impact of Isaac Gifford and Bryce Benhart returning for another year and what that means for the 2024 season.
Yeah, it's too bad that did kind of get swept under the rug. You know, I think when you kind of look at the way that Nebraska's depth chart is situated for 24, you probably didn't have somebody at right tackle that you were just absolutely ready to go to if Bryce Benhart decided to move on. And I don't know that there's anybody in the program that kind of changed the narrative about themselves as much as Bryce Benhart did last year. He played really well. I think he really benefited from a change in strength and conditioning approach. And you know, I think he played. It was almost 800 snaps last year. Like he played all 12 games. I mean, that's huge to have coming back. And then, you know, on the other side of the ball, Nebraska didn't have a rover waiting in the wings. They've got guys in this incoming class that they feel like can kind of grow into that role. But Isaac Gifford was your leading tackler by over 30 tackles last year. He played really good football. You know, a couple interceptions here or there that kind of went through his hands, and you're probably even talking about that season even more. And he was another guy that, you know, these Gifford and Benhart combined played over 1,400 snaps last year for Nebraska. And having that leadership back, having that veteran presence back on both sides of the ball, that's huge. And in the secondary with Gifford, too, I mean, you're losing Quentin Newsome, Omar Brown, who was really good last year, Phelan Sanford, who came in and kind of did a lot of things for you. So having that kind of a veteran back, that's really important, I think, for kind of continuing that upward trend for the defense.
And one quick personal story here on Gifford. His first varsity snap at Lincoln Southeast, he was the quarterback and I was the center, actually. It was in garbage time against Bellevue East. We fumbled the snap. He absolutely was livid about the situation that his first varsity snap was a fumbled snap. So what I know about Gifford is that he did not want his Nebraska career to end the way it did against Iowa with a missed tackle. They get into field goal range, they kick it and end the game that way. He did not want his Nebraska career to end that way. I don't know that personally from him, but with what I know about him, I think that is almost a surefire bet that would stick in his craw if that was his last defensive snap at Nebraska.
Was that your fault on the snap or his?
Next question. I'm not going to blame the kid that went D1 is all I'm going to say, but I don't want to take the blame either.
I'm going to put that one on Elijah. So Bruntz, I want to switch gears for here a little bit. I'm away from Nebraska because I feel like we've covered that pretty well in depth here, and we'll continue to as things develop. But I know we've talked all year kind of about you being a Heisman voter and sort of what that process looks like for you. Are you able to reveal retroactively who you voted for? Is that allowed?
Yeah, it was. Well, you vote for three in order. It was Daniels, Penix, and Nix.
Okay, so I was a big advocate of Penix as the Heisman winner this year. So the way I kind of view it, I'm curious how you looked at it as an actual voter, was I felt like it would have been hard to tell the story of this year's college football season without Michael Penix. I feel like you could leave out LSU and Jaden Daniels and you wouldn't miss a ton outside of an incredible statistical season. How did you view it that led you to vote for Daniels over Penix?
I looked at the outstanding statistical season. That's kind of where it went. I mean,
it was just overwhelming. The stats were just overwhelming.
Yeah. I mean, I watched a lot of Washington football, probably more than I should have. And, you know, Penix is a fantastic player, and Washington doesn't do what they did this year without him. And, you know, with the head-to-head wins over Nix, that's why I went with Penix over Nix. But, yeah, I mean, I think Daniel's season was just kind of hard to get past. And I try to divorce the team stuff as much as I can, and just go with the best player. And, you know, for me, it was Daniels this year. So it was a little bit tougher, I think, than maybe what it's been in the past when I voted. But that was the way I shook out this year was with Daniels 1, Penix, and then Nix.
I think the hard thing this year was that you always hear it in the discourse around the Heisman. There's a Heisman moment for a lot of these guys. And I can't remember there being a Heisman moment this season. There's the one game where Jaden Daniels racked up what was almost 600 total yards of offense or some stupid number like that. And maybe that's the one, but there's not a moment that stands out in my mind this season as being, yep, that's it. That's a Heisman moment.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, I don't know. It helps. I mean, it helps to kind of get to the front of people's minds. But I mean, Daniels was just so good all year, and he had those games, the really, really big games too, that were kind of eye catching. I agree with you. I mean, and it's probably a situation too where it's like, okay, if LSU was a little bit better or was actually playing for something, maybe you pay a little bit more attention to that stuff. But
yeah,
I felt like he himself was just a better overall player this year than those other two guys, and that's why I went with him.
Mike, before we get you out of here, I want to get your thoughts back to Husker football. Do you have any inclination of what the next shoe to drop might be? Obviously, McCord was the story yesterday. There's been a big story every single day. Tuesday or Monday, it's Raiola. Tuesday, it's, Kalen's going to go visit Michigan State now. Wednesday, it's McCord. Do you have any inclination what the Thursday storyline might be? What might be talking about come 5 o'clock this afternoon?
I mean, the quarterback is going to continue to drive the conversation. I mean, you're getting to the point where you're going to have visitors on campus starting tomorrow, and then it's just kind of, I don't know if you're like waiting around for the smoke to come out of the chimney or what, but
a new pope has been named.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's going to be I'm very prepared to be surprised, put it that way. Just based on how the last 3 days have gone. But I think it's going to be quarterback until Wednesday.
Well, in about 10 seconds, would you like to say anything about quarterback coach at all?
It's coming.
Okay.
It's coming.
That's Michael Bruntz, Husker 24/7. Bruntz, we appreciate your time as always. We will talk to you again next week.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
That's Michael Bruntz from Husker 24/7. Coming up next, we got a little more Hurrdat Hot Seat coming up on Hurrdat Sports Radio. And we will talk to Bryant Appling, head coach of Buford High School. Dylan Raiola is high school coach